Hello, this is my critical reading response. My name is Maksas Kairaitis. And let's just get into it. So the first question, how does Shipka's approach expand or complicate your understanding of what it means to compose? So before harping on the intricacies of the term composing and its newly defined extents and limitations, it's important to realize that this academic discussion is ultimately a very pedantic one, though admittedly a perpetual intellectual debate that I love indulging in. When discusses technology's role in changing how one generally engages in academia, she herself can't help but point out that Honda doesn't consider blackboards, desks, podiums, light bulbs, and so on and so forth as technologies when they very much are on a technical level. Even then, though, considering a blackboard as just as much of a technology as a smartphone, is purposefully ignoring what general audiences perceive as technology. Smartphones have permanently changed life as we know it, whereas blackboards have ultimately served as a stepping stone in pedagogical practices. Nearly everything is a technology, but some are more technological than others. This same looping tangent can be made about multimodal learning, how we've technically always been multimodal in our learning because it has always involved physically writing along with oral and visual input. The technologies that have been implemented into academia broadly merely advance input methods that have existed since the first classroom. The debate can sometimes feel pointless. Both arguments towards the terms technology and multimodal aim for universality, a broadening of its applications. The case made for composing is no different, as Shipka, or specifically Odell and Prell, advocate for composing to encompass words' relationship with visual images, the various formats that words and pictures can take up. I personally always associated composing in relation to music, which Odell and Prell also mention, but also its connotation always felt overly sophisticated, to the extent that it felt like it could only be used in cases related to music or scholarly writing. However, the broadening of the definition, or perhaps the removal of its connotatively implied pompousness, helps one realizing that composing is simply the act of creating, regardless of medium or whether or not writing is involved. In what ways do your own composing processes reflect or resist the multimodal and cultural dimensions Shipka describes? Composition has changed for me, and I imagine most others, by way of ancillary support and device through which one creates and shares their creations. I typed the script for this on a MacBook. I looked up the word ancillary on Safari before including it in the script because I wasn't exactly confident in what my mind's definition of it was. I wrote the script on Google Docs. I will edit this video in Premiere Pro. I will submit this assignment on an online educational platform that's used broadly all over the nation by most universities. The way this question is phrased is kind of funny actually, because it is impossible nowadays to resist multimodality or cultural influence. These devices of communication and creation are ubiquitous and almost necessary to operate in most of our day-to-day lives, including mine. However, the changing of the time only underscores what Cynthia's self proclaims. Print and digital overlap, intersect, become intertextual. We are not abandoning any medium, they are simply melding together, unable to exist without one another, yet have reached a state in which to categorize them separately is an almost futile endeavor. Can you think of a time when you created something, written, visual, digital, or otherwise, that felt rhetorically meaningful but not traditionally be considered writing? How might Shipka's framework help validate that experience? If not, please reflect on what you might consider making outside of non-traditional writing expectations or categorization. So this will be a regurgitation of what I wrote for my journal entry, but regardless, my occupation currently is that I'm a freelance video editor for a Twitch/YouTube streamer. So the creator will play games with inane and arbitrary restrictions, and it results in anywhere from 5 to 50 hours of footage. My job then comes in, which is to condense that footage down into a digestible length while still maintaining the broader picture at hand, having the progression of the playthrough be sensible, and interspersing that with humorous moments that aren't necessarily crucial to the overall storyline. So, personally, I've always thought this job to be lowbrow in my view, for even though these videos get many views and many people seem to appreciate its existence and express as much through their comments, I still struggle to see value in watching a grown man progressively get more frustrated at a hell he himself has created. While not necessarily having to do with Shipka's framework, her example of showing the pink ballet shoes with text on it to her workshop attendees and how many reactions, either implicitly or explicitly, pointed to its academic invalidity due to its lack of polish or rigor, rather. However, in my view, rigor in relation to composition as we know it today is merely the act of forethought and revision. I say this because despite my internal conundrum, the process for creating these videos is an assuredly rigorous one. It involves watching and rewatching, cutting clips so as to flow seamlessly from one to the next, attempting to contain the going ons of sometimes over 30 hours of footage in your mind at once. And you need to do that in order to see, what the fluff is and cutting it out. And it's nothing short of exhaustive and thorough. While this revelation does not necessarily quell my lowbrow woes, it does allow me to see that with any given creation, it is the effort involved, the forethought, the doubts, the revisions, the re-revisions that give it validity, just as valid as traditional writing. What questions or tensions arise for you in response to Shipka's argument? How might this reading shift the way you think about communication in everyday life? So I suppose that my concern is the same that I had when I took my intro writing and rhetoric class, which in that instance is that when nearly everything can be rhetorical or have rhetorical implication, intentional or not, then the weight of its importance starts to become lean. Of course, there is plenty of insight to be gained on what the rhetorical significance on something is, what something or someone is trying to persuade you of, but with rhetoric's ubiquity resembling that of matter, the term's impact lessened for me personally. While I don't think Shipka is arguing for writing and composition to be defined and applied just as broadly and universally, I think there will come a point where the terms, for lack of a better word, will lose its oomph. As the range of multimodality increases with the invention of new technologies, as our abilities to create and share many formats of compositions become even more vast, writing and composing will cease to have a defined shape. When it could be everything, then it is nothing. And I suppose I wonder where there is a limit, if there even is one.